So I've said it before, and I think I'm going to keep saying it probably this entire season, but Hero Society looks absolutely screwed. It's not often you can, within the first half of not just the first half of an anime, the first half of the first core of an anime season, just show a third of the surrounding area completely annihilated. You have media buzzing, you have civilians freaking out. And I think when you have the end of last week's episode, pretty much it reinforces, like, what is the point of heroes if we can't stop this threat? We cease to have a purpose. And you really feel like, well, of course, like, who wouldn't have that feeling when shit, man, like, literally, if you can't defeat it here, what hope do you have in the future? And the fact that it feels like the likely bet, if you were to have to place your life savings on anything, is probably Shiggy and crew winning this fight. And I don't know where we're going from here. Now, full live reaction is available on the Patreon if you're interested, of course, but let's talk about this, because the more I watch of this arc, the more I see of this fight, the more helpless Hero Society feels, and the more death flags pile up. If Deku didn't come in this episode the way he did, Eraserhead would have been killed. I don't think that's up for debate. I think it's entirely clear he would have died in that moment. I don't think his reaching from behind the back, grabbing a weapon would have done much to a man who, even without his quirks, is literally able to solo the entire goddamn surrounding area. And you add in giant Hulk-like creatures, and you're pretty much, it's a recipe for disaster. And the fact that you have characters, whether that's Favorite Mountain Lady, whether it's Midnight, who, she ends up surviving, that'll be like the biggest curveball ever. I think she's pretty much guaranteed to die. And just the more characters you see on screen, the more you realize that this is an arc that's not supposed to just be, here's 1,000 heroes that you could see at any given moment on screen, and you were only going to touch the nameless ones or the ones you really will have no connection to because you've only seen them in background filling characters rather than being full-on stars. And to see how you can establish such a power imbalance, because it would be a lot different if Eraserhead didn't remove his abilities, right? I mean, my boy, he's given his all. Even with moisturizing the eyes, to not blink once, it's pretty much night and day. Like, seriously, the fact that if we were just fighting him normal with him being able to control decay, he even flexes in this episode that the reason the Namu were fine is because he's so good with his abilities now that he can decay everything surrounding but them. But then to just have this man who the entire time we focus on him is smiling. This is like the essential, like, I've grown up dad moment, because he has all these like feelings and voices in his head. And you just have, you kick the episode off with the smug bastard smiling because you hear all the media and like they're talking about how shit everything's going. And then the one character smiling in that moment is, of course, the man who pretty much caused this to happen to begin with, just all chained up, but just so proud of his creation. But then you have Shiggy of all characters, Shigaraki, who's just sitting there, who's having like almost a mental crisis because he has this voice being like, those aren't my thoughts, you know what? And then the way they did the hatching scene, completely disturbing, completely disgusting. Seeing Shiggy break open from an egg and almost be reborn, it works perfectly for visual symbolism, but it is goddamn disturbing, especially with the way they detailed it. But I love the fact that it feels like no one can control Shigaraki. I don't think anyone can, whether on his side, the hero side. It's doom right now. Whatever he wants to do will happen. And I mean, just the sheer variety in this episode. You have moments with Bakugo, like he unleashes some explosion attacks that if you were to take a step back and some of those wider shots with just the sheer scope of the explosion, you could have shown any My Hero fan that and they would have assumed Endeavor did that. And that really goes to show, kids or not, like it doesn't matter anymore. Like once he removes his abilities, at this point, you can't hold the students back. They have to fight, otherwise we're all screwed sort of a thing. And the number of just sheer close-up shots where you saw everyone give their all. Endeavor, man, like, there was a couple of moments where I thought he was down for the count. But the fact that he gets up even more pissed off, even more ferocious, I was like, I didn't know where we were going. And I think just watching the escalation of a fight with as many characters as we have, the way that this author has still been able to utilize so many different abilities, large and small. You just look at some of those like smaller scenes near the end of the episode. You have the students just kind of sitting there, and you'll see people basically act as telescopes or do these little small details that they don't need to do. But when you're filling a scene in with a bunch of characters, you can look at so many different personalities and abilities and find ways to very intelligently incorporate them, even if they're not the reason you'll win a battle or the reason you survive a battle coming up. The fact that everyone feels like they have a purpose in this battle, and even if we don't see all those purposes, we can tell it's a group effort. It's not like Deku or All Might or an Endeavor is the difference between victory and loss. No, it's they all work together, they all win together, or they all die together, or the most likely option, who does survive, retreat together to be able to fight another day. Like, that feels like what we're building up to, and I was really impressed. I mean, just the fact that we're 7 episodes into this season. Episode 1 of this season immediately kicked into high octane. They're like, hey, you know what? We're not beating around the bush. This shit has been built up, it's been set up, we're going to do it. And every episode has gotten progressively more intense, worse in the sense that the heroes feel like they're falling more and more on their face as each episode goes by. And when you can have essentially a kaiju battle in this episode where you have just this giant hulking beast pushing Our Lady through and at one point grabbing Loki style, I thought he was about to smash, like, you know, cut down the trees or something. No, just tosses her like she's nothing. But like, I just don't understand where you go from here other than retreat. And I don't know what would eventually cause that. The only thing that can make sense to me is if eventually our boy has to blink and then therefore the abilities return and decay gets unleashed again. If that's the case, you could very quickly kill a lot of heroes, and not only just heroes, civilians, and destroy the surrounding area. And if that's the case, eventually someone's going to have to say retreat. We're already kind of establishing that the students are getting leadership roles here. I mean, it was a pretty emotional scene at the end because it really felt like Midnight was saying goodbye, like, this, I don't expect to live, and to see, you know, a student go from wanting that advice, what should we do, what can I do, to now, here's the last advice I can give you, but it's all on you now. Like, the fact that you get that amount of pressure, and you could feel the fear in her, to then kind of getting up, being like, we're gonna fight, we're going to take him out, and honestly, as heroic as it is, you never quite know, like, even if you win that battle, there's an even bigger battle behind you. When you have your big villain of an arc smiling throughout the entire goddamn battle while weakened without abilities, and then you have an army of powerful subordinates who are all equally destructive in different ways that if you throw them against any character, it's possible they could kill some very big names or groups of characters. It feels impossible. And I think the whole purpose of the first half of the season is to make the heroes feel helpless and to really showcase the power discrepancies and the power imbalance here. So when we probably get a rematch or we build up to that, shit just, it ain't gonna be right, because this isn't one of those things where Shiggy's going out this arc. It feels impossible. It'd be bad writing, it would feel like, right? Because Shiggy can't go out in the next few episodes. He's too powerful, and none of our characters seemingly are on par with him yet. The only one who could be would be Deku if he could master more of these abilities, but he isn't there yet, and that's pretty insane. I leave another episode dumbfounded. I'm gonna keep saying it till it's not true, but Hero Society is absolutely effed up right now. But thoughts and feelings, theories of your own, if you got any, do let me know. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here. You can also consider supporting the Patreon if you want to see my full live reaction to today's episode, and you can also get video shoutouts like a few people are getting today. We got Julius, Marsh, and Kyle Kowalchuk. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.